Hey guys, so I was planning to do a different video for today, but Candace came back and her return was epic, so we definitely need to go ahead and cover that. Now, all of the people who are attacking Candace, this is really wild to see this. People have been calling her crazy since basically she became really popular, and it's ramped up since she's been taking up this cause to advocate for Charlie Kirk, to fight for him, and to make sure that the truth is revealed about what happened to him. Okay, so there's a few things that I want to recap or make sure that we cover in this video. First, I want to address how everyone is saying that Candace is the one who put it in everybody's head that Israel was the one who killed Charlie or is responsible for his assassination. And I actually want to point back to a tweet that was probably published maybe a month or two before Charlie Kirk's assassination, where it said that people were going to kill him. Okay, so I was trying to look for the tweet and I can't find it, but I think Harrison H. Smith is the one who posted it. And basically he was saying that I think it's on Facebook, but this isn't the exact tweet, but it's something like, I'm not going to name names, but I was told by someone close to Charlie Kirk that Charlie thinks Israel will kill him if he turns against them, basically. And so if anybody thinks that that is why that happened, it would be because of that tweet, not because what Candace is doing after the assassination has already happened. And so I don't think it's necessarily fair to say that she's responsible for people thinking that when there was kind of a paper trail already laid out, if that makes sense. The other thing I want to talk about is the Google searches. And so Candace announced that she was taking a 10-day, 2-week break and she was not going to do any new episodes, but she was still pretty active on Twitter. There were other people who were keeping up this ongoing effort to really look into what happened to Charlie Kirk and his assassination. And these are not people that I normally watch, and so I wasn't really sure where to go to get that information that Candace would normally provide. And so it was really good to see other people who were keeping up this investigation. Ian Carroll, I've been watching a lot of his videos, and this was going back to before he even started working with Candace, because he was really popular for his conspiracy theory videos, and so he's doing what he's always been doing. And so it's no surprise that he is looking into this and continuing to try to figure out what happened to Charlie Kirk. And so anyway, when Candace was on vacation, or when Candace was taking a break, I did come across Sam Parker and Ryan Matta, if I'm saying his last name correctly. There were a few other people who were involved in the Twitter stream. I'm not sure what it's called, but basically they were talking about the Google searches, and basically back in I think June or July of this year, this would have been around the time that they had the Turning Point USA event in Florida. People in Israel and the Washington, D.C. area were searching for people that we now know are connected to Charlie Kirk's assassination. So a few specific locations were searched for, names were searched for, the hospital was searched for, and all of that stuff, right? And so that is pretty chaotic when you think about that, looking back, that people were searching for things on the internet where obviously anybody could find it. And I don't know if people weren't expecting people to care about what people were searching for. So it's really good that people were able to come across that and share that information. So that was a huge kind of like break in the story, because that kind of lays the trail, or the paper trail, and the idea of this being a planned assassination. The other thing that came up was Mikey McCoy's reaction when Charlie was shot. And so people are saying this is his chief of staff. This was the guy who was doing a lot of filming leading up to the shooting. And they're talking about how he's basically right beside Charlie Kirk when he gets shot. And then he basically just walks off really calmly. He's on the phone. And so this is a really weird reaction. And it's like one of those weird reactions that you see in a movie where a building is burning in the background and that person is just walking away calmly. And because I just watched Shooter, the movie, not too long ago, there is this epic scene where Mark Wahlberg's character, he kills all of the bad guys and he sets the house on fire, and he's just walking away kind of calmly. And that's kind of the energy that Mikey McCoy gives in this video footage of him walking away on the phone, not really reacting in a scared or traumatized way to what he would have just seen, which was Charlie Kirk being shot. And I'm not sure if I'm surprised that Mikey McCoy's name is coming up, because he was one of the guys who gave a speech during the memorial, and he did have his new wife, new fiance, whatever, with him, and their energy when he was talking just seemed a little bit weird. And so if all of this is coming out that he was overly calm when Charlie Kirk was assassinated, having just watched that, obviously it is traumatizing to see someone shot like that, and especially if you were someone who was not at the event and you were watching all of this online, just the constant repetitive loop of seeing that video is very traumatizing. It just makes me sick even thinking about that. And so yeah, the people who would have directly seen that, their experience would have been a little bit different, because it would have just been a kind of like a quick acknowledgement of what happened and then you react. It's not like you're getting that constant replay unless you're thinking about it over and over in your head. And so I think it would have been a little bit more difficult for them to process what happened. And I'm going to come back to this a little bit later, but I do want to acknowledge that Mikey McCoy's name has come up because he was Charlie Kirk's chief of staff, and then his father is a pastor who's also connected to the situation. And so they have kind of had their names thrown into this conversation as people who are connected to Turning Point USA and Charlie Kirk, on whether or not they could be doing more to advocate for Charlie Kirk and really try to get answers about what happened. The other major thing that happened was Candace's book club leaked, and this is obviously a thing that you have to sign up for. I've never been a part of her book club, and when I first saw this clip, I know that some people are like, hey, is this AI or is this a real clip? Because the AI videos on Twitter, on social media are crazy, and you can just tell sometimes when they are AI videos because they're really out there. Like I saw one of a squirrel eating some spicy food and drinking the water and then running away because the food was too spicy. And at first I believed it, but then obviously it's AI, right? And so people weren't sure if this video from Candace was AI, but it actually is a legitimate video from her book club. And basically what she was talking about was how she thinks the tech bros are lizard people. And I've heard her say that before, so it wasn't shocking to me. And if you are into conspiracy theories, you know that is a thing that people believe, where basically they think that people are not human and they are shapeshifters. So that is pretty wild and out there. But if you've heard other people other than Candace say that, that doesn't really shock you or anything like that. The other thing that she pointed out was that basically when the government is involved in your killing, they give you a holiday and a boulevard. And I think that was it's pointing out the fact that a horrible assassination happened, but it's also connecting what you do to remember that person after the fact. And so I don't know if the fact that you get a holiday or whatever after you've been killed or assassinated is proof that the government was involved in it, then people are really interested and invested in figuring out what happened here and who was responsible for all of this going down. And then the other thing that she said in that book club meeting was basically that she was disappointed in Trump, and a lot of people were taking those comments to mean that she was blaming Trump for the assassination, like he was responsible. And I did watch another video on this, and I'll share a screenshot of this person's video, but he was basically saying that he took it as her being disappointed in how Trump was reacting after the assassination, not that she thought that he was responsible. And I think to me that makes more sense, because she's been saying for a while that she's been disgusted with politics. She is not wanting to be involved in that world, and that also she is upset with what Trump is doing, and she's kind of not believing in him as much as she was before. And so if you've been watching her videos, you know that whatever she feels for Trump right now is not something new. It didn't just happen. She doesn't just feel that way because of Charlie Kirk. She's kind of been frustrated with him for a while now. Then, because I've covered Steven Crowder on the show, he reacted to the book club leak, and he basically called her the C word, and he's not happy with what she's doing. And so we can go ahead and watch a clip of that.
Killed Charlie Kirk is the claim. Now I'm going to tell you how I feel about it, what I think about it, because you know who else would have to be involved? And this is the implication, of course, by design, and you can see the response with people out there saying, oh, well, then anyone who's close to, this is an inside job. You know who's really close to President Trump, and you know who people are now saying stood to gain?
I want to pause it here because I don't necessarily agree that by accusing Turning Point USA of being involved or doing anything wrong, that instantly implicates Erica. And what people are pointing to is, one, the fact that she's his wife and the fact that she's the new CEO. So any criticism of Turning Point USA seems to be a criticism of Erica. And I think what you need to really acknowledge is that there are people who were running Turning Point USA with Charlie Kirk, and I don't know what Erica's title was with the company before before he died, but we're really looking at the org structure before he died, not what the org structure is now. So I think the fact that she's the CEO, the fact that she's his wife is irrelevant. You can criticize the organization and the people who were involved in the day-to-day stuff with Charlie Kirk. You can look at them, investigate them, and all of that stuff without necessarily criticizing or blaming Erica Kirk or thinking that she was involved in this.
Erica Kirk, who has now been put, Candace with that language, with this accusation, has put the wife of Charlie Kirk, and she'll say, that's not what I tried to do. It is. It's the result. Erica Kirk in the crosshairs. It's not like you have to look through 6 degrees of separation.
That's the end of the clip, and I find that interesting because, again, people, if they think Erica Kirk was involved, it's because of whatever they saw with their own eyes. There are some people who think she's too happy, or they just didn't like her reaction. They thought she was acting. You are going to think that because of whatever is going on with you internally. I don't think people thought that because of Candace or whatever. There are some people who have been paying a lot closer attention to what Charlie Kirk does, what Turning Point USA does, Charlie's interactions with his wife, who can read that dynamic a little bit better. But I did agree with some people that a little bit felt performative and all of that stuff. But as far as whether or not she's involved, I don't know. And I don't think that people are saying that just because of Candace's videos. They're going off of their own assessment and their own feeling of the different characters who are involved. Okay, so now we're going to get into Candace's return and what she covered in today's episode. So first I want to start with a clip of the guy who took the SD card. I don't know what his name is, but she mentioned him in past episodes, and basically he ended up sending her the selfie video that he was taking during the shooting, and so she plays a clip from that, and we're going to watch a little bit of that now.
He's dead. God help him.
Okay, so I want to pause it here because she's going to speak on what he just said, but I do want to add my 2 cents now. I don't think it's a big deal that he said, hey, he's dead, because given how close he was to where Charlie Kirk was when he was shot, he would have seen almost the equivalent of what we saw if you're watching at home and you saw the close-up video of him being shot. That would have been his perspective, and there were a lot of people online who were saying, hey, once I saw the video, I knew that he was dead on impact, basically. And so I don't think it's far-fetched for someone who was that close to him, like physically close to him, to have that same reaction to what he saw. And so I don't know, but I don't think that this part is problematic, because also I was literally going through Twitter when the story broke, and there were a lot of people unofficially saying, hey, he's dead and all of that stuff. And so we did not get the confirmation that he was dead until maybe like an hour and a half later or something like that. But then I also read that people said that he was pronounced dead once he arrived to the hospital. So I think that there were people who were there, obviously, who knew when he was dead, right? And so I don't think that this statement from him is as big of a deal as she's making it, especially given how close he was to Charlie when he was shot.
That's the first time it was announced, actually, that Charlie Kirk was dead. It's kind of weird. Go ahead, catch your breath, hit rewind, watch it again, watch it over and over again like I did, because you're probably thinking out loud, what the F did I just watch? What's going on? What were Charlie's closest friends and allies and the people that were going to carry on the torch doing? Picking up phone calls they were already on, and filming themselves and prematurely announcing when not a single person could have known that Charlie Kirk is dead.
Okay, that's the end of a clip, and this is really awkward timing, and this is unrelated to anything that we're talking about. That face that Candace just made, she always reminds me of Gabrielle Union when she's acting, when she does that face, and it's so funny because I think she made fun of her in some video because of the whole trans stuff, but it's funny that they have similar mannerisms when they're angry and they're talking, and so it's just really funny. But anyway, what I find interesting here is because right now what we're really looking at is people's reactions to what happened to Charlie Kirk in real time when the shooting happened, and then we're also looking at what they're doing now after the fact. And so I know that a lot of people criticized Candace for what she's doing in the aftermath of the shooting, and then they were criticizing her for not going to the memorial because they're like, oh, you weren't invited, you weren't as close to him as you're trying to make it seem, and all of that stuff. And so what really matters is what people were doing when the shooting happened, and then also the people who are still part of his organization, what they're doing now in the aftermath. And so I do think it is kind of ironic and strange that Candace is the one who is going the hardest and doing the most to get clarity on what happened and to reveal the truth. And so I do find that interesting because if you go back and watch interviews of Candace and Charlie Kirk together, you can see the dynamic and the energy that they have, and they do seem like they're super close. And I don't know if they ever dated, and if they did, they would have broken up, obviously, because they married different people. And what I find very interesting about their dynamic is how much lighter Charlie Kirk seemed. Like this sounds bad, but he obviously looks like he's aged 20 years since those videos of him and Candace together. And so you can kind of physically see the stress that what he's doing has put on him. All of the traveling, all of the debates, and all of that stuff. And he actually looked really good in the last few months of his life. You could tell that he lost weight, he was slimmer, and he looks like a real politician. He looked like someone who was on his way to becoming president. And so I just find it interesting how much lighter he seems in those earlier clips, and it's just really crazy and sad when you look back and you see what they were going through when they were working together, and then where that all led. And so I do think it's important, like if you're truly friends with someone, you should be doing all that you can to figure out what happened to them. And sometimes when there are things like this that happen at the local or smaller community level, it's really just the family members and everybody else has moved on. And so this is a more public situation, and so that's why people are kind of more overexposed to what Candace is doing because of how public all of this is. But this is like being annoyed with a family member who is trying to figure out what happened to their son, their daughter, whatever, and nobody else cares, and all of that stuff, where people don't care. And so you don't really see that situation every day to where you see someone just devoted to figuring out what happened, and that's not something that we are familiar with seeing. And so I think that is why it rubs people the wrong way, because they're just not used to seeing someone go this hard over something this tragic and this violent when you see it happen in front of you. The other thing that Candace brought up was a fishing trip, and so she mentioned that she went to Wyoming, and that was the last place, or Charlie took her there, and I guess maybe she hadn't been back since her and Charlie went there together. And then she was also talking about how she was doing some writing, and I think she mentioned that when she told us about the dream that she had of Charlie Kirk, I think she said that he actually said a lot more to her than what she shared with us, which is interesting. And so I'm going to get into the next part that she went into, which was she shared more text messages between her and Charlie Kirk. So we're going to play a clip of that.
Messages, they can tell you that these ones are real. Here's what he wrote. We were again talking about Kanye. Charlie wrote to me, "You're going to be the Iron Lady of America." He had such a political vision for me. I never wanted that sort of a thing. I see it so freaking clearly. I might be Moses, though. I might not see this whole thing through. LMAO. If that is the case, be my David. I said, dude, you haven't even realized your power yet. You're so young, was what I was thinking. He said, if I tell you the true prophecy that I know in my gut, it's really sad, but I hope it's wrong. He went on to say, anyway, I am not sure if I will live to see the end of this revolution. I believe you were the piece that God meant me to meet that will finish the fight. Since the beginning of TPUSA, I knew in my gut that I might get wiped out at any time. I cannot explain it, but I dream about it all the time, like all the time. Anyway, that's depressing combo for another time, LMAO. I said, that's weird, more of a fear manifestation than an actualization. He said, I'm not really afraid of it, but I'm just telling you what I know to be true. And he told me that. I don't know why. Charlie knew he was going to die young. But messages. They can tell you.
Okay, so that's the end of a clip, and I really wanted it to play all the way through so that you could hear everything that was said. And so there's a few things that I want to respond to. So first is that she said that Charlie Kirk told her that he was going to die young, and it's because of TPUSA. And so I found this part interesting because you can have some people who know that they're going to make a huge impact, and it's either going to lead to something good as far as how it ends, or it's going to lead to something bad. And so I'm not surprised that he would have been thinking this way about what he's doing, considering how smart and how well educated people were saying he was, in the sense of he educated himself outside of the school system, and people were really just talking about how mature he was for his age, with how he communicated things and how he talked about things, right? And so I'm not surprised that he would have been saying things like that. The other thing that I find interesting was the reference to his dreams. And so what I want to point to is everybody mocked Candace for talking about the dream that she had of Charlie. And so when you hear her talking about what Charlie Kirk was saying about how he had dreams about what was going to happen to him, I wonder how people are going to react to that. Are they going to mock Charlie Kirk, given that we know what happened to him? We know that what he was thinking is basically came true. And so in that sense, does that make you reevaluate what you think about people who have these sort of dreams where someone tells them something, or they just picture something happening and they fully believe it? What are we going to make of this new information? So some people could be more likely to believe that dreams have meaning. And I was actually just reading a passage of the Bible where I think it was, I can't remember his name, but basically there was somebody who was in the palace and he was arrested, and then I guess people came to him and said, hey, you know, we're having dreams, and nobody could interpret the dream but him. And so that points to the fact that dreams have significance even in the Bible. And so I'm more likely to believe that these dreams have meaning because I believe in that sort of stuff anyway. I'm just curious on how people will react to hearing that Charlie himself is experiencing dreams like that as well. And then I also know, on the other hand, people are just going to say, hey, you know, this text thread is just you making yourself feel like you're important and that you're supposed to be some superhero, some fantastic person that we don't think you are. And so obviously it can go either way, how people read these text messages and what they take away from them. And the other thing I didn't get was the reference to David. And so basically what he said was that he didn't think that he was going to live to see the fight through. And I think he said that he was basically destined to meet Candace and she was going to continue the fight for him, which is super interesting because that's exactly what is happening now. He's not here to continue the fight. And what is the fight exactly? Is it for Israel's cause? Is it for America's cause? What is the cause here that he was supposed to be here to fight, but she was going to have to continue it for him? And the other thing I want to hit on is him talking about TPUSA kind of being the death of him. And so Ian Carroll did a video where he's basically talking about the structure of TPUSA and the funding, and that was a really interesting video. And basically my takeaway from the video was that TPUSA was basically pre-built and it was handed to Charlie Kirk, so it wasn't necessarily something, it could have been Charlie Kirk's idea, but he was also basically given something else that someone else had created and wanted him to kind of take over, if that makes sense. And so it's not as organic as people think it is, based on the funding and the structure of the business, based on what Ian Carroll talked about in that video. So that was super interesting. So if you haven't seen that video, I would recommend checking it out. And then the other thing that Candace talked about, it's not in this clip, but she did talk about her connection to Kanye and to her husband, and she's basically saying that those two things are what kept her from meeting the same fate as Charlie Kirk, basically, because when Kanye tweeted, I like how Candace Owens thinks, or whatever he said, that put her kind of on everybody's radar. And then Kanye, he's always been super big, but he's more so also known for the crazy things that he says, the outlandish things that he said. And so he really gave Candace a lot more exposure than she would have had without his tweet. And so that, in a sense, put her more on the map and kind of solidified her hold or her standing in pop culture and in commentary in general. And then the other thing she talks about was going to the UK and meeting her husband. And she also talked about the idea of handlers and how people were sent to manage them. But because she met Kanye, got connected with Kanye, and because she met her husband, that sort of protected her from that. And that's super interesting because I don't know if it's because her husband is English. Is it because he's Catholic? What is it that kind of insulates her and protects her? And then also too, because her husband's family is said to be from the House of Lords, they're super rich and they would have influence that the ordinary person doesn't think about, I would imagine. And so I would imagine in a sense that gives her protection as well. Like, you can't touch the wife of this family, of all of that sort of stuff. And so that's just really interesting when you think about it. And I don't know if other people are thinking about it as deeply as that, but this was a really great return episode from Candace. She covered a lot of new stuff, but she also kind of put together the pieces of what other people have been talking about since she's been away, and this story has gotten even more fascinating. I'm sure that people are going to continue to investigate and figure out whatever they can about this situation, wherever it leads, whoever is implicated in all of it. And I know that Candace has basically declared war on everybody who is against her at this point, and so I really am interested in seeing how all of this turns out. Alrighty, so that's the end of this video. If you liked what we covered here, let me know in the comment section below. What are your thoughts on Candace's return episode? What are your thoughts on the whole Charlie Kirk investigation? Let me know in the comment section below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.